One country in the Middle East has just made a move that could impact how much you pay for fuel and for pretty much everything else. So for decades now, a small group of countries has influenced prices by coordinating how much oil to produce and when. The group is known as OPEC. It's the world's most powerful oil cartel, controlling about 80% of the world's oil reserves. And now, after almost 60 years in OPEC, the United Arab Emirates has decided to leave. That means it can put out as much oil as it likes when it likes without the group's biggest producer, Saudi Arabia, getting a say. How is that going to impact consumers, the economy, and power dynamics in the Middle East? I'm David Levitz, and my guest is Justin Dargin. He's an energy policy specialist and a senior fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, a Qatar-based think tank. Justin, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, David.
Well, let's just get right to it. Is this good news or is this bad news for consumers like you and me?
Well, I mean, I would say that right now it's not going to have a major impact, of course, seeing that there's a disruption in the Strait of Hormuz. But if we look at the mid to long term for the average consumer, this would actually be a benefit. I mean, because we can see that if the UAE were to produce as much oil as it is able to, then it has the potential to reduce global oil prices by about $5 to $10 per barrel. So if we look at the overall consumer, they're going to be quite happy by this, at least if you look at the mid to long term. But we won't see any type of major impact, of course, within the short term.
Right. We'll have to see how this develops with the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to be talking more about what a weaker OPEC means for the world. First, let's just take a closer look at what OPEC is. It stands for Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. It's a group of 12 oil-producing nations, mainly in the Middle East. It was formed in 1960, and by the 1970s, it produced about half of the world's global supply of crude oil. But as oil production expanded in other parts of the world, OPEC's influence declined. So in 2016, the group formed an alliance with 10 non-member countries, including Russia, to form OPEC+. Together, OPEC+ controls about half of global oil production. Member states say they cut and raise production to stabilize the markets. Critics argue the group manipulates oil prices for its own gain. So, Justin, OPEC Plus controlled about half the world's oil supply. Now, with the UAE leaving, it's down to maybe 45%. Is that a big deal for the global oil market?
Well, we have to look at it from several different angles. On one hand, the power of OPEC lies in its spare capacity. And what spare capacity is a country being able, or an oil producer being able to rapidly increase or decrease its oil production, and thereby how much oil it can bring to bear in the international market. So what that means is that whenever there's any type of supply crisis, and of course, not necessarily with the Strait of Hormuz, because this impacts the two principal spare capacity holders, but in general, that means that if the price of oil goes too high, or if there's too much demand, then Saudi Arabia and the UAE would be able to rapidly increase its production within just a period of a few weeks to a month to be able to meet that demand, and thereby would place downward pressure on oil prices. Now, what happens is, because when the UAE leaves from OPEC, that means that the burden of being responsible, more or less, of being able to moderate oil prices lies firmly on Saudi Arabia. So that means it has a type of lone wolf problem. On one hand, it has to discipline other OPEC members if they are OPEC plus members, if they cheat on their quotas. And then also it leaves the UAE being able to produce as much as possible and thereby benefit from trying to expand its market share. I mean, so we see that this will have a fairly significant impact. And also, if we look at it in a sense, the cohesion of OPEC as an organization. Because what this does, it sends a signal to OPEC and to other OPEC and OPEC plus members, is that, okay, if other members can leave and they can produce as much as possible, then what benefit is there for me to be part of this organization and thereby restrain my own oil production? and not benefit from that. So you see that this is how it can have an impact structurally and then also on the cohesion of the organization as a whole. So it's quite possible we could see other members thinking about whether they should still remain in this organization or not.
Do you think this sends a signal to other members that they can leave and just produce as much as they want without Saudi Arabia getting to tell them how much to cap?
Well, I mean, OPEC has and OPEC Plus, they have a chronic cheating problem, which means that many of the members consistently and constantly cheat on their quotas. But the thing is, they try not to do it too much. They try not to be too flagrant with that, because what happens is Saudi Arabia has typically wielded its what it's called is its oil weapon, its sword, in that when it sees other members taking advantage of its restraint, then it will produce as much as possible, which will drive down prices and then impact these countries' revenue as well. So that's pretty much how Saudi Arabia was able to more or less act as a discipliner within OPEC as an organization. But what will happen, though, is that when the UAE, which is number two, we could say, within OPEC, then we will see that maybe other countries will start to think then I really don't have to be in this organization and voluntarily restrict my output when we see that the UAE, as a fairly significant oil producer, is able to do it on its own and without maybe repercussions from Saudi Arabia. So going ahead, we can see that this would be perhaps the strategic calculus of many of the other OPEC members.
If many of those other OPEC members did leave, what impact would that have on the global oil market and on prices?
Oh yeah, well, it would be a free-for-all, basically. So it would be market share competition to the max. Now, of course, it would cause oil prices to decrease quite, I would say, in a very major way. We only have to go back about 10 years ago, about 2014 and 2016, where Saudi Arabia and the UAE and also other OPEC members, they decided to produce as much as they could in order to, let's say, undercut U.S. shale production. So they want to basically punish the U.S. Oil industry for, let's say, free riding, as they would call it. And when that happened, prices dropped to about $30 per barrel or so. I mean, within quite a rapid period. I mean, looking from about 100 to $100 per barrel to about $30 per barrel within a period of about a year and a half or so. So we would see prices decrease significantly, but then that's also going to have a negative impact for many of these countries because Saudi Arabia, the UAE, many other oil producing countries, even the US, wouldn't be able to sustain extremely low oil price. Their oil industries wouldn't be able to absorb that. And then if you look at the budgetary revenue for Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries, if you look at, let's say, below $70, $60 per barrel, they're going to have fairly significant budgetary problems and will start to run deficits in a critical time such as now when they are trying to invest in their post-oil economy, so to speak.
Justin, a moment ago, you mentioned the U.S. Donald Trump has accused OPEC of, quote, ripping off the rest of the world by inflating oil prices. Is OPEC's weakening a win for Donald Trump and the U.S.?
Well, you see, this is a type of scenario where we can say, we hate what you do, but please keep on doing it. So the reason why I say this is that the U.S. has a very peculiar relationship with OPEC. I mean, OPEC is actually the reason for the U.S. Shale industry. I mean, we have to look at it like that. Because of the production restraint of OPEC, it allows a price floor, and which U.S. shale producers are able to produce oil from shale reservoirs at a price which is sufficient for them to continue to do so. So if Saudi Arabia, the UAE, other major oil producers, if they do not exercise that restraint, and then you start to see more let's say, market share competition, then that means prices are going to go down. And then the U.S. Shale industry, which depends upon a relatively high price to continue operations, then that would be negatively impacted, of course. So, I mean, this would serve to be a bit of it would be a problem for the U.S.'s position as being the number one oil producer and also number two global oil exporter. Now, on the other hand, you know, I mentioned this kind of dual perspective of the U.S. It's that the U.S. consumer obviously wants to have as low as oil prices as low as possible. I mean, so this is the type of, if I could say, even somewhat schizophrenic, let's say, policy of the U.S. in the sense that the consumers they vote based on, to a great degree, based on oil prices and then inflationary pressure from that. And then, but the U.S. Oil industry depends upon having high prices in order to sustain itself. So then there's this delicate balancing act. So when you see statements like that coming from politicians, often in the U.S., you really have to take it with a grain of salt. And they're just basically playing to their constituencies when they start to say things like that. But they do understand quite well that the U.S. oil industry depends on an organization such as OPEC voluntarily restricting production.
Justin, let's talk about the timing of this move because it comes as hardly any oil is moving through the Strait of Hormuz, including oil from the United Arab Emirates. Prices are way up. Why make this move? Why leave OPEC now?
Well, I mean, on one hand, we can look at it as the UAE saying, how can I be part of an organization where another member is actively attacking my energy infrastructure? Right. So, I mean, so we have to look at it from that perspective. So obviously the Emirati leadership, that is one of the reasons. Another reason too is that there has been this geostrategic competition between the UAE and Saudi Arabia that has been building over the past several years or so. For instance, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they have come to disagreements about what types of options should be pursued in Yemen, Sudan, other countries in Africa, for instance, even Libya and what have you. And then also there has been economic competition as well. So when you look at the Saudi Vision 2030, which is more or less their development plan to be able to reduce the share of how much they depend upon oil for their overall economy. So what are they doing? They're investing in tourism. They're investing in becoming a financial services hub and so on. And this is precisely what the UAE, namely Dubai, focuses on. So Saudi Arabia has been offering incentives for international companies to move their headquarters from Dubai to Riyadh. So the UAE is looking at this and seeing that if you look at, let's say, regional economics, if you look at geopolitically, Saudi Arabia is not necessarily the ally that they have been, at least from their perspective, previously. So this was seen to be an opportune time for the Emirati leadership in order to make this announcement.
How much do you see this announcement actually weakening Saudi Arabia's dominance in OPEC and in the region?
Well, I mean, due to this, Saudi Arabia, I mean, due to the exiting of the UAE, Saudi Arabia is going to have basically the only spare capacity now within OPEC as an organization. So previously, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they were the members that had the spare capacity, the most spare capacity of any meaningful amount. Now, Saudi Arabia is soon going to be the only member that has that spare capacity. So the burden is going to fall on Saudi Arabia to be able to provide that essential spare capacity to the global economy when the global economy needs it. Within OPEC as an organization, as well as we were speaking about earlier, some of the other members, the members of OPEC and OPEC Plus, they are going to think that, okay, if the UAE is able to do so and able to produce as much as possible, then I should be able to do so as well. And then if Saudi Arabia does not respond to the UAE, then we perhaps would be able to try to obtain as much market share as possible. And see, and there's something else, David, that we have to consider. The UAE has invested about $150 billion in its oil and natural gas sector over the past several years. So the UAE was looking at the US, looking at Brazil, looking at other countries being able to free ride more or less from its restraint. And the UAE was thinking that, look, I'm not even able to, we as a country are not able to benefit from the multi-billion-dollar investments that we've made in our energy sector. So now it's basically gloves off, and the UAE is going to produce as much as possible because it sees the future outlook for oil demand is not looking that good due to global decarbonization. I mean, so it's in its best interest. It's in its national interest to produce as much as possible within this ever tightening window of global oil demand declining.
To basically take advantage of the demand that is there now before the world moves to renewables?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, so there's actually a German economist. His name was Hans Werner Sinn. He wrote this book called The Green Paradox, and this just explains everything. The Green Paradox is basically the theory of when there is a type of global treaty, or let's say global countries come together in order to reduce hydrocarbon demand and also production. What this does is this operates as a type of announced expropriation. So that means that countries that produce oil, they are going to find it in their best interest to try to produce as much as possible within as short a time frame as possible before this window shuts. So we see, yes, absolutely, the UAE is taking advantage of that, and we're also going to start to see other countries doing that as well because global decarbonization is happening. It's probably going to pick up due to the Strait of Hormuz crisis. So it's in their best interest for them to produce as much as possible without their oil becoming a stranded asset and
What,
not being able to monetize it.
once the crisis is over, if it does end, how much could they really ramp up production?
Yeah, well, I mean, currently the UAE produces about 3 million barrels per day, 3.5. Well, I mean, not currently, but let's say prior to the Strait of Hormuz, of course. But I mean, that's historically how much the UAE was producing. So they have the capacity of about 5 million barrels per day, and they are rapidly approaching that. Now, they also want to increase their oil production to about 6 million barrels per day by 2029, 2030. So we're looking at about 1.5 million barrels per day that the UAE would be able to increase and and bring to bear to the market, in addition to what they are producing and exporting now.
You mentioned that you think that the UAE's exit from OPEC could send a signal to other countries that they can also exit and produce as much as they like. Do you see this as the beginning of the end for OPEC, or is that too dramatic at this point?
Well, I mean, I don't want to say it's dramatic, but I mean, we have seen that the obituary of OPEC has been written many times over the past few decades. So I can't say that we should necessarily write OPEC or OPEC plus off as of yet. But this is a very severe, I would say, weakening of the organization. I mean, one, we can even look at it ideologically. I mean, so OPEC was established in 1960, and it was an organization that was formed on the basis of countries that were former colonies. Were able to, their mission statement was to control their natural resources. So it was almost a form of resource nationalism. I mean, so this was a type of global solidarity during that time. And that is, even into modern times, has kind of been at the background. Always in the background of OPEC as an organization. So when we see that Qatar left, for instance, in 2019, even though Qatar is not a major oil producer, Angola left about 2 years ago or so, and now the UAE leaving. So this really shows, I mean, that perhaps there could be type of rush for the doors, so to speak, when other countries are going to see that perhaps we should try to produce and export as much as possible and grab as much market share. So yes, it could actually be free for all. I mean, so but we also have to remain very cognizant of writing the obituary for OPEC too soon, because that has been done before.
How and when will we know if the UAE's exit from OPEC is actually setting off a shift in the global energy order, if you will?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, we would know basically on how other OPEC members are setting their production policies. So if you start to see other OPEC members, for instance, increasing their production beyond what their quotas are. Now, remember, there's always a bit of cheating that's going on within OPEC as an organization. You just can't escape from that. But the thing is, whether Saudi Arabia, which is the de facto head of OPEC, whether it considers the cheating to be in a somewhat acceptable margin. I mean, so when you start to see other major OPEC plus members flagrantly, let's say, not adhering to what their production quotas are, then you can see that Saudi Arabia's power, Saudi Arabia's influence in order to direct the organization will be greatly diminished. And with Saudi Arabia not having the power to do so, to discipline more or less other members if they run afoul of the production quotas, then that's when you'll see the organization begin to fall apart.
Justin Dargin, thanks for talking to me.
Thank you for having me, David. I appreciate it.
What do you think? Are you already feeling the fuel price hikes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you liked this video, please hit the like button. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.